Hey coaches, Darren here. Thought I'd do something a little bit different today and reflect on a training session I did last night with our under 12 1 and 2 girls. It's a session that I just jumped on at the last moment, so didn't have a whole lot of time to plan it, but had a bit of an idea on what I wanted to do coming in. So I thought I'd walk through how I sort of structured the session, things that worked, things that didn't, and the key teaching points that we focused on, because I think these are areas that most of our teams, particularly under 12s and 14s, could do well to model sort of sessions like this and learn from some of the things that I found as I went through. So the key things I came in wanting to focus on, firstly, from like a daily vitamins and finishing perspective, was power layups. The ability to play off 2 feet. I've noticed these girls are mostly using 1 foot layups, so I wanted to try and build that in as a habit. The handoff and chase ball screen actions were things that I wanted to do with this group. I can see they've got very good with slice and gets. I originally was only planning to do this with the 12 ones, and the 12 twos would be doing some other stuff, but speaking to Coach Jim, we decided, hey, let's throw this on the twos and see how they go. And I actually think they went really well. Huddles, everyone that knows me knows I really want to build in that player-led decision making. So it wasn't on the original plan, but when we got to the 4-on-4, there was a perfect opportunity to add huddles in, so we jumped on that opportunity. So the games that we used, I'm going to talk through. We did some elbow finishing to start, starting with some shooting. We then added in lane runner drill. I'll talk about why it wasn't in the original plan. We then did 3-on-3 for about 25 minutes, working on the chase and handoff actions. Bit of a typo there. We did 4-on-4 continuous for 20 minutes, so that wasn't 3-on-3. And we finished with repeating the elbow finishing drill with a few extra changes to it. So let's jump into it. When I was setting up the elbow finishing and sort of the whole session, a big thing I've been using is trying to get kids to really challenging them. What they're doing is things that elite players would do. So I was talking about introducing some things that the big V players have been doing, but also saying that I think you're up to it as well, particularly when we're throwing some big challenges on them like screens and handoffs. The idea was that this would just be nice and easy to practice our power layups. A line at either elbow, dribble in, do your power layup, head to the back of the line. The challenge I think that I found is that I had too many players for that. I had 13 in the end, now that I'd combined the teams, and so that was going to have a line of 6 and a line of 7, which was way too long. So what I ended up doing, as you can see on the diagram, is adding in a third line on the corner. This then meant that I couldn't really do power layups though, because we'd have a safety issue with kids going into each other. So we ended up just making it that it was going to be sort of a jump stop, jump shot to work on, so they wouldn't be crashing into each other. Getting into groups of 3 and 4 with these under 12s was just a battle in itself. But I really had to sort of try and set the tone with my energy. I had to use countdowns, 5, 4, 3, and then we ended up giving them 10 star jumps to start with, which is probably a bigger penalty as I would go, because they were just huddled up in masses. They couldn't get them to self-organize into groups of 4. So after that, we just coached them through. They got through it. We didn't have any point systems on this. We probably could have. We did it as we did when we came back in the final drill. The key teaching points when we get to the power layup, kids were not pointing their feet towards the baseline. We want them to have a nice, powerful base. So what we ended up going to allow us to do this was lane runner drill. Which most, all kids really should know. I like this because we then were able to have 2 or 3 in a line maximum, rather than 6 or 7. So this one, which everyone should know, but we sort of had them in 2 teams, one on the left side, one on the right side. I get them into those spots first, so that I'm not trying to explain the drill up front and then split them off. So we got them into how you can see on the diagram here. And then the idea was the player in the middle dribbles forward, makes a pass to their cutting teammate who's going to have a target hand out, and make that pass to them. I really encouraged one-handed passes. I'm going to try and use there we go. So they're dribbling forward. I really wanted this player on the wing to make a target hand, really cut hard and call for it. And then we wanted a one-hand pass here from the passer. That's something we've been working on in recent weeks. We're talking about it as an elite skill, but these kids are picking it up well, so I'm just putting it in anywhere I can. As the key things I had to coach on the go were around finishing with your feet pointing towards the baseline, and making sure they knew it was still a layup, not a shot. The whistle on the screen is sort of where I stood for most of the drill, because that allowed me to coach both the pass and the finish. I sometimes went behind the basket as well. This was a much better use of our space than what I originally had, so I think we got more out of it. We ended up making some competitions and going first to 8, and then switching sides out of that. Now, into the juicy part. This was, so, you know, a lot of these kids had, I know certainly the ones had some exposure to screens, mostly on their baseline plays, and had done a bit of handoffs as well. So I wasn't coming from teaching them these concepts from absolute scratch, but there were a few key teaching points I wanted to work through with them. So we had a full court with 13 kids, 2 teams. So we did a very quick demo up the first side here, and then we split off, having a group up each side. How it worked is we had the 3-on-3, play with the ball on one side. They would make the pass across to the player in the middle. They would then, we wanted this player in the middle to trigger the action of the dribble handoff. So they were going to dribble at the defender. This was the really key teaching point that we needed them to do. A lot of them kids in their dribble handoffs just go straight at their teammate, and it doesn't make it effective at all. So we really encouraged them to dribble at the defender. They didn't do it. We tried to coach on the go, but we'd also be quite happy to just try and quickly rewind it and get them to do it properly, so they could get a feel of it. Defense, we were only really coaching them to sort of know their ball gap, to jump to the ball. You know, they were sort of the basics. And then once that dribble handoff occurred, they were then playing live out of that. So when we talked about the dribble handoff, the key teaching points were as a dribble at the defender, and get a foot like above and below them. We talk a little bit more about angles in the screens, but we showed them what that looked like to start with. I think the key thing with a handoff for kids is to know that the player cutting needs to take the ball from the player's hand. If you're giving a handoff, you've got to they either take it from your hands or you keep it and hold on to it. And that avoids that sort of confusion where the player tries to give it, but the player doesn't want it, and the defense ends up snapping that off. We had to manage in this, I found, real sort of keen players. I call them keen beans when they were the receivers here, probably because kids have been so used to running gets and they're running to the player with the ball. We really had to encourage them with this one to make sure they were spacing away. Don't be so keen. Let the player with the ball dribble at you, rather than you coming towards the ball and shrinking the space. Again, what worked in this was trying to use my feedback window for this. And what I mean is, I've just talked about a whole range of different things there. I didn't want to try and cover all those things like in one go. And I also wasn't stopping each rep and then talking for 2 minutes. So there was one instance where, working with Coach Jim, I sort of opened my mouth to say something, and he was sort of ready to stop the drill for me. And I just sort of looked and I said, no, I've missed my moment. Like the girls were all ready to start the next rep. I really try to use that moment from when they finished the last rep. They're getting organized for the next rep. I'm giving some quick feedback on the go, but then I'm really encouraging them to get back into it. As I said, we coached the defense on the go, and the dribble handoff, we really tried to make them confident on it. So first 8 minutes was just playing 3-on-3 out of that. A pass and then a dribble handoff, and playing out of that. We really encouraged the weak side receiver as the game went on to try and make sure they weren't cutting into the space of the dribble handoff. They were staying outside the 3-point line. When we got to the next 8 minutes was then about the ball screen. So we kept exactly the same setup. All that was changing was the action. So we now got the player in the middle. Rather than dribbling handoff, they were going to pass the ball and across to the wing. Wing had to get open, of course, and then they were going to step in and set that screen. So we used the elbow as a reference point there for them to come through, touch the elbow. the screening things, the two things we talked about with them, point you back where you want your teammate to get open. And this was a really good question then that we could use as the game went on. There was one example where the player set their screen at more of an angle pointing their back towards halfway line. So it was sort of saying, well, what shot did you just set them up for? And they sort of smile and go, oh, a 3-point, a shot from the sideline, basically. So that was good that they were recognizing those things as we went along. The other key teaching point with a screen, I find, is that we want the kids to take contact, not make contact when they're setting a screen. So we would find that with juniors, they'd often really try and sprint in and bump the defender. We encourage them to just get that little bit of space between them and then set the screen once. It's now the dribbler's job to try and make the most of what screen you've set them there. Again, we really tried to encourage confidence. Kids were a bit tentative with this to start with, and even this first pass and then rip and then pass was very sort of tentative and slow. So we really had to motivate them to try and get that energy up, rip the ball like windscreen wipers, and then make that pass on as well. Defense was still coaching on the go, under 12. We were not coaching, all we wanted from the defense was to fight and stay with their player. We didn't talk about switching or not switching or different colors. It was just purely fight and stay with your player, call help if you need it. So this was our second 8 minutes. We played out of that. That gave more than enough reps for everyone to play. It was just switching light and dark every time. It wasn't score, you keep possession or anything like that. There were no point systems. The final 8 minutes was about giving them the option now to use one or the other. So what we did within this one was give them a very clear sort of decision on the player with the ball in the middle. So we made the first pass across to the middle. And then this player had to read, okay, if this player on the wing can get open, I'm passing, and that means I'm going to then follow in and screen. If this player is denied, I can't get the ball to them, well, I'm going to dribble at their defender and make a handoff so that I can get the ball to them. And we just encourage them to be confident with that. I think that worked pretty well in the end. The main thing that didn't work in this was my management of time, because after the first bit of the handoff, I was keen and ready to go straight into chase. Coach Jim pointed out to me that we hadn't had a drink break yet. We'd been going for 25 minutes. Kids were pretty gassed. So that was a good call by him. And that sort of got us back into a schedule of getting in those drink breaks as well. Because it was pretty hot. It was about 30 degrees as well. So this was 24 minutes, it took up about a third of our session, but I was really happy with the way they were picking up these handoff and on-ball screen concepts those technical details of the angles for kids that probably hadn't done it, a whole lot before so far. So we came back out of the drink break. We went to 4-on-4-on-4 continuous. We all know this one. Offense plays defense to start with, and then whoever wins out of that one goes down the other end to play the third team. I went to this one because I wanted to try and now challenge whether we could do the handoffs and the chase with a little bit more flow to what we were doing, not so scripted. It's easy to do it when you're just doing it after one pass and going straight into it. So this was to test their memory a bit. We didn't have any specific point systems. We could have maybe said anytime you use a handoff or a screen, adds extra points to your score. We just really encouraged it. I got them into their spots first, which I found really worked. So that meant this other group went down the other end. I did have to pull them up once for not listening, and I had to project my voice a little better. But otherwise, there was no demo. The kids know how to play 4-on-4 basketball. So it was just explaining them how the flow of the game worked, encouraging handoffs and chase action, just really saying that I really wanted to see those actions through there, and then getting them going and getting them playing. I saw a great opportunity here for this group. Whoever was the losing team, they had to get together and huddle. And I had to encourage that early on. As soon as the possession was over, I had to tell them to huddle. By the end, because we did this for about 25 minutes in sort of with drink breaks along the way, the kids were getting pretty good at self-organising themselves into huddles. There was at least 1 or 2 leaders there, which was really cool. So the main things I then try to do during the game is just sort of talk about like, hey, what's next to the kids? If the ball's getting a little, slow, I'm just talking on the go, talking about things like, hey, handoffs, screens, and they would find ways to bring those into the game. What worked and didn't work? Yeah, I forgot to brief the subs. So we had one team that had 5, and so the player needed to work out their subs, except 5 minutes in, I realized that player had just sat on the sidelines. They didn't know how to get themselves into the game. So as soon as I'd done that, it worked like clockwork. Players kept shrinking the floor. So within about, after 1 pass or 2 passes, all 4 players were inside the 3-point line. We'd seen that earlier in the 3-on-3 as well. So in the final game, my solution to that was, how we managed that was we added in a rule where anytime all 4 players were inside the 3-point line, I'd start counting down from 5. And if I got to 0 and they were still all inside the 3-point line, it'd be a turnover. And that worked really well. I found that sometimes it was the ball handler who dribbled out, and I didn't really want them to. But I think that didn't happen too often. I actually found that there were a few players who were naturally staying outside a little bit more often, recognizing, some space. So I did find that quite an effective technique. The use of coaches here was great. We had Jim and Rob, so two coaches to work on the full court here. They would jump in the huddles when the team was out of the game, so we had one up each end. That worked really well. The game was at its best when we called the fouls. We had a few players that were going feet first with their defense, which I know is a program-wide issue. I just had to coach on the go, feet first, and call the fouls, get a quick reset of the play, and coach the players when they were in their little huddles. We mixed, we didn't worry too much about light and dark. We did have a light and dark team. The third team was mixed colours, again, and particularly being girls, didn't want to have them frequently changing, jerseys, and works fine. The girls, they're old enough, even at 9 or 10, to know who's light, who's dark. They played that pretty well as well. So, we played that in sort of 3 8-minute blocks. That took up the final third of our training session. But to finish, we went back to the elbow finishing. We used probably our space a bit better. We had 4 groups. We got them back into their teams from the 3-on-3. I thought that would be a simple way to get them back into teams quickly. Some girls had forgotten. It took a bit longer than it needed to. But again, they are under 12s. I used the storyline in this one around, it wasn't just a shooting game to finish, it was the challenge of we're late in the 4th quarter in a game, we're tired, it's been hot, how well can we shoot after doing all that? So the competition was simple. First team to get 10 power layups and then 5 jump shots. We talked about teaching points about catching low and ready, holding their follow through until the ball hits the rim when they're doing their jump shots. We were just trying to coach on the go as much as we could otherwise. Yes, there's things we could have gone into about footwork, things like that. We're in the last 6 minutes of training though. I was making sure we could get off before the domestic game after us started. The other thing that probably I would change is we nearly missed our finish time. So the problem with using a target at the end of training is that if we've got to be off in time, to be respectful, make sure the next group gets on time. And we were getting dangerously close to missing out on that because they weren't making their shots. But that would be only my sort of what I'd do next time is probably just put on the clock or stopwatch for 3 minutes and seeing how many kids could get out of that. But it all worked fine. The numbers worked well. We ended up getting off the court 2 minutes early, and that was happy days. So, in closing, it was a hot session, but I thought we managed that well. Coaches, as I said, making sure we got the drink breaks worked well. Chase and handoff as actions. I think that it showed me that pretty much vast majority of our teams should be adding those into their programs now that we've got slice and gets pretty well underway, and just trying to get as much out of the drill as possible. Like just the coaching on the go of the defense, things like that. Using that sort of 8 seconds between when one rep finishes and the next one starts to try and give as much feedback as we can without, slowing down the game. And the way I ended up doing this session as a whole, sort of aligned with what I didn't really mean it to, but we ended up with about sort of 20 to 25 minutes of daily vitamins, footwork, and finishing. 20 to 25 minutes of a small-sided game, so breaking down an action, practicing it in 3-on-3, and then 20 to 25 minutes of playing games, 4-on-4 that had a little bit of structure to them and purpose. So yeah, enjoyable session, and hopefully there's some things you can learn from it that that worked or didn't work for me.